Um,
Uh, Hello, everybody. Welcome and happy Independence Day. This is the Patriot Review and the Fifth Paradigms joint event. It is our first episode, and we're going to discuss about patriotism in contemporary times. My co-host Archit Gautam joins me today, and we also have Dean and Professor Sreeram Chaulia from the Jindal School of International Affairs joining us live from Sonipat. Hello, sir. Good morning. How are you doing, sir?
It's good to see you, Avirat. Yes, thank you.
Yes, sir. So right off the bat, what do you think is patriotism, or how would you define it? Because there's a lot that's being said these days about patriotism, nationalism. So there's a lot of clutter. If you can help us clear that out a little, it'll be great.
Yeah, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, criticized Donald Trump a couple of years ago, saying we are patriots and we are not nationalists. And he tried to make a distinction between the two. And this was a typical, European pushback against Trump because he was behaving unilaterally and was imposing trade barriers on the Europeans, calling Europe a competitor and a foe, and spurning his allies and that sort of thing. And Trump called it nationalism, America first. And Macron was saying, well, that's not really nationalism, or that's not really patriotism. The patriotism somehow is more enlightened or more supposedly less bigoted and less directed at foreign enemies or adversaries. I don't know. I mean, the distinction is kind of semantic, and it remains to be seen which brand of whether it is nationalism or patriotism, which of these has a higher appeal. But undoubtedly, the world has moved away from the liberal globalization principles in recent years, at least since the 2008 economic crisis, but especially now with the pandemic crisis. So nationalism used to be considered a bad word or something that was condemnable as or something very 19th century or 18th century and bygone, raw and emotional, and it's a passion and something that needs to be restrained and controlled for the sake of creating a global community, a big liberal global community. But there has been a lot of opposition to that cosmopolitan global identity now. And whether you want to call it patriotism or globalism, or nationalism, I think it's there to stay. And it doesn't depend just on individual people like Trump or whether they get re-elected or not, but more broadly, I think there is a sense that the borderless world, cosmopolitanism, these things had alienated a lot of people on the ground. The elites were okay with it. Elites, because they benefited from this global interactions and commercial transactions and mobility and all that. But for the ones who have no mobility and who are struggling with the results of this globalization, there is a blowback. So I think nationalism or patriotism, whatever you want to call it, is here to stay. And it's going to redefine a lot of things, not just the international relations and such things where there's likely to be more friction and conflict between countries, but also the way we organize economies, the way we mobilize the societies. So I think there is no better time for patriotism / nationalism than today.
Thank you so much, sir.
so on that note, I had a follow-up question. So where did this go wrong? Like, why is nationalism projected as so bad? Uh, I was raised in an army background, and I never thought a debate like this could exist, but it does. So why is it looked so down upon? In the end, it's just loving your country, right? So if you could tell us how this happened and how you know nationalism is in America is just related to white nationalism, or in India it's some people are called Hindu nationalists. So how did this image form over time?
Well, the first thing is that it was downgraded and downplayed by liberal elites as a obstacle to achieving borderless trade and commerce and movement of people and ideas and all that. Because when you say nationalism, it immediately you associate with borders and with protecting your borders from foreign phenomena and ideas and all those things. And so they wanted to break down all these barriers for global commerce and free trade and a free movement of finance and of people and ideas and all these things. So liberal elites, starting in the 1990s, after the end of the Cold War, began to treat nationalism as a harmful or as a obstruction to achieving this borderless world. So they had a big project to achieve, and they thought that the more you emphasize nationalism, it will lead to violence and it will lead to conflicts and bad blood between countries and within countries, ethnic and identity. We should overcome all that. We should make it a big global marketplace where the same products and the same services and the same workforces are moving effortlessly across borders without any controls. So free immigration, free trade, free movement of finance. These things were the main agendas of the liberal elites, and they wanted to tamp down nationalism because nationalism is seen as, um, preventing the integration of the whole world into a single whole, like a global economy. There was no global economy until 1991 because there was a Soviet Union and a separate sphere. That now after 1991, they said we're going to create a single global economy under US liberal leadership. And we don't want nationalism because nationalism is going to hurt our ability to integrate everyone into a big mega structure. There was no world economy or global economy, or even I would say there was no global system. It only came about after 1991. So nationalism, and then they used to give examples like the Balkans, Yugoslavia, where the genocides and all in the name of nationalism and ethnicity. These are bad, so these are all harmful, and we are now evolved. Our identity is now becoming less focused on territory and on ethnic identity and cultural links, more about creating a one world kind of thing. So they wanted to create that because it benefited the cosmopolitan class and the global capitalist elites. So that's how this came about. But now, as I said, there is a blowback against this, tendency to downplay context and local belonging and sense of people's sense of attachment to their own countries is coming back because the globalization project has not been fair or equal to everybody. So people are clinging to nation nationalism again as a way to resist what they see is the attempt to erase their cultural distinction, uniqueness, and to create a global melting pot. We are no longer forget being citizens. We are citizens of the world, or we all consume the same products and we all produce the same things, and there's a global supply chain. So the particular was abandoned for the sake of the general. Now people are saying the general is nothing but a kind of a project to rob us of our identity and of our roots. So that's why people are fighting back against this now.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I'd like to ask you another question about how the youth of today sort of have this sense of shame attached to the idea of calling themselves patriotic. There's this inherent like trait that the youth of today is trying to portray. At least I'm talking about in India, because they don't want to be misunderstood as bigots or racist or any other categorizations implied by society. What do you feel about that, sir?
I'm not sure if it is widespread in society. I think people are inherently very nationalistic in India, including the youth. You may see those in some, liberal citadels, like universities or elite institutions and such things. But if you go out in the broader society, I mean, just to give you one example, just a few days ago, there was this India Today poll where there was a question about should we boycott Chinese products? 90% of the respondents, 90, are saying we should. Why? Because they're nationalistic and they perceive the Chinese as a threat at our borders, and given the recent incidents that have happened. So the 10% who are saying we should not boycott are the ones who may feel ashamed of nationalism,
Right.
you know, and said, well, we all have to get along. This is a big global village, and we should just cooperate. But the problem with that is, there's a degree of naivety to that notion of we should cooperate. And second, as I said, self-interest. Some of them, especially the ones from the elite sections, um, benefit from transnational connections and
Right.
transnational flows of capital and mobility.
Right.
So it is in their self-interest to downplay nationalism. If there is nationalism, there are going to be barriers. If there's nationalism, some Chinese investment, for example, will be restricted. Some Chinese trade with India will be restricted. They may be having businesses and import and export companies involved with China, and their bottom line may be dependent on it. So therefore, they say, well, it's not good. We just need to have this, liberal order, not nationalism, because the liberal order will mean more profit and more mobility and access for me as a person belonging to elite class. So I don't think that it's the youth as a whole are highly critical of nationalism. I think it may be in some segments, and some of them also have been told that nationalism is a vice because it can lead to bloodshed and conflict, be it domestic or international. And some of them don't need to clutch on to some core identity anymore because they think the world is integrated, it's a globalized, they still talk about a globalized world even though it is now deglobalizing and going in the reverse direction. So I think it's mostly vested interests and people of a certain elite segment who oppose this because they don't need any kind of a broader community. They are anyway alienated. They live in gated communities. They are from well-off backgrounds. They don't need that kind of a community support. They are cut off from their own communities. So therefore, they don't feel it. But I see it, among common people. The nationalism is very strong in India, and it's likewise growing around the world because they didn't benefit much from the last 30 years of this liberal order.
Right. Right. So you're trying to say that it's more of a narrative that's being pushed around, and there is this imaginative sort of, discourse that people are critical of such ideas and ideologies for them benefiting. Okay. Thank you, sir. So I've another question. So you authored a wonderful article in the Times of India where you wrote about how India's dynamic foreign policy can sort of counter China and challenge it in Asia's hegemonic structure. So what do you feel about that? Could you express your views a little for our viewers here?
Yeah, what I was saying is, the Galwan clash in June was a kind of watershed moment. Things cannot be the same as usual after that because we lost 20 troops, and the Chinese have not even revealed how many they lost, but they did lose troops too. So we need to rethink our approach, to the world because we had been, cautious about some things, not to provoke the Chinese, on some matters. But now what I'm basically saying is that um, the notion that it's mixed and that yes, there is competition, but we also have to cooperate, that kind of thing is less relevant today after Galwan. And so we must accept that it is essentially an adversarial relationship. I'm not saying they're enemies, but it is essentially an adversarial relationship based on security competition and mutual ambition to become, major powers and struggle for sphere of influence also. It's a geopolitical struggle. It's also an ideological one because the Chinese look down upon India as a failed democracy, which cannot function and which is divided and which cannot lift all its people out of poverty and all. They think that their model is superior, the one state authoritarian model. So there is a fundamental clash between the state systems, and the level of trust that people of India have in China is very low, especially after the recent encroachment they've done at the LAC. So what I was saying in that context is we need to uh, find a variety of partners and work with them with a sharper focus on how to check Chinese aggression and how to check Chinese hegemonic, push. So
Right.
for that, we have to step out of our shell. We need to be assertive and avert a situation where, as if we carry on with the usual policies, which will not work in this kind of a. There's a new China we are facing. Let's look at it this. I mean, this is not the China of Deng Xiaoping or of his successors. Elizabeth economy calls it the third revolution. So Mao was the first, Deng was the second, now Xi Jinping is the third. This is a different, beast we are reckoning with. So accordingly, we have to be different. We have to be more proactive, more engaged in coalition building, more involved in alignments with various powers, not just with the US, but there are many others in the region who are much more desirous of that. So I was saying that we should have a bolder or braver foreign policy than before, and I'm sure it's something along these lines is being worked out.
Right, sir. And like, especially, since the surgical strikes, there is this talk going about ye Naya Hindustan hai, and this is a new India and India 2.0 that, gives it back or answers or responds or retaliates in a way that it normally wouldn't. So this is great, sir. So coming to my final question, first to Archit, actually, how do you celebrate Independence Day, Archit? What do you think is, what are some things that you do on this day? How do you celebrate it?
Um, Um, as a child, I used to go to my dad's office and they used to have the flag hosting. So it was a nice event. It went on for like half a day. So that was a pretty special, occasion. Uh, Otherwise, right now it's not the same because of the situations. But
Right,
yeah, it was fun as a kid.
right. So what about you, sir?
Well, it's a very important occasion for us to recommit ourselves to, raising the stature of this country. When the flag goes up, it's also reminding us that this country needs to go up to a different level, and all our individual efforts should be, oriented towards that larger goal that we should rise as a major power in the world. So that's always my, you know recommitment or rededication every August 15th. um, I think the um, flag nationalism is not a bad thing because rise to another level. You cannot diffident about it, because the other side, the adversaries who are challenging us, are highly mobilized on nationalistic lines. So it's, as we said, nationalism slash patriotism is now the flavor of the times. So we cannot afford to be loose, and we cannot afford to be highly divided and argumentative over these issues. We can have those, but end of the day, I think the flag is something we should rally around. And so 15th August, something to cherish, because it's at least one day of the year we are, while we are doing an everyday kind of patriotism, on that day it's important to remember why we exist and what should be the larger goal and the purpose of our work and of our exertion of our ideas and thoughts and actions. So I think nationalistic mobilization is necessary, and it's the only way for survival, security, and safety of India. So we should not be ashamed about it, as I said before, and we should be very clear that um, the mass sentiment is actually with nationalism. It's not against nationalism. The ones who are criticizing it are actually a disgruntled minority, and ideally we should take them along. But if they are obstruction the process, we should just leave them aside and continue our project of nation building.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. With that, I'd like to wish everyone a very happy Independence Day. It's always been a special day, and all I'd like to say at this instance is Sare Jahan se acha Hindustan Hamara. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you all. Bye bye.